Good morning, Facebook friends. Helen Archontou here, CEO of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. Thank you for joining us today. We know that those of you who've been following us this week know that YWTV has been very focused on Earth, which today's Earth Day, obviously, and we've been focusing on sustainable living all week as part of Earth Week with some great conversations. And as you also know, Thursday is the day that we share the mic now with Black women in our community to amplify their voices. And we had a wonderful discussion planned today that was a Black woman in our community that's doing some wonderful work around sustainability. But we felt that it was important to bring a different conversation to you today that was very timely, and she understood, and we'll be postponing our Earth Day conversation for just a few weeks from now on another Share the Mic Now day. And today, we'll be, having a different discussion, which is, again, important and timely. So we thank you for your flexibility as viewers for rolling with us. And I want to thank our guest, Assemblywoman Shavonda Sumter, for joining us today at such short notice to be with us for this conversation. Thank you. Welcome, Assemblywoman.
Thank you. Thank you. So glad to be here.
So we'd like to start with showing a statement that the YWCA of Northern New Jersey, on behalf of the organization, I've made yesterday, and we're going to show that now, and then we'll jump into our conversation. And just need some volume. Okay, and we may be having some technical difficulties with that, but let's see. We will try to pull that up again. But let's not despair. We can, we'll get word when we can bring it on. And until then, we'll just jump into our conversation. And let me start by introducing and giving you some background on our guest this morning. Our Assemblywoman represents the 35th District here in New Jersey. I specifically asked her to join us today. And again, I'm so grateful on such short notice. I know how busy she is, that she was able to, adjust her calendar to be with us. We felt it was very, very important in the aftermath of the verdict this week that we, have a timely and important discussion about where we go from here. I know there's been a lot of conversation about justice and accountability, and what the outcome was, and has been and is going forward. But the important thing is to really talk about going forward from here, and also spend some time about this moment. But with that, let me share you a little bit about our wonderful Assemblywoman and her background. She entered the New Jersey General Assembly in 2012. She has served in the executive leadership as Deputy Speaker and the Majority Conference Leader. She currently represents, as I shared, the 35th Legislative District, and that includes both Bergen and Passaic counties, which are both parts of the Northern New Jersey YW's region. In her current session, the Assemblywoman serves as the chair of a new Assembly Committee, Community Development and Affairs, where she looks forward to tackling important issues such as community blight, the wealth gap, and upscaling the needs of New Jersey small businesses. She also is a member of the Labor and Law and Public Safety Committees. Assemblywoman Sumter is an advocate for job growth, women's health, voting rights, civil rights, and criminal justice reform. She has also championed legislation addressing Black maternal and infant mortality in the state. And recently, the governor has signed her voting rights legislation into law that will restore the voting rights for more than 80,000 individuals who are currently on probation or parole effective March 2020. Lastly, our Assemblywoman is a staunch advocate for access to healthcare services, including mental health care. Her career in mental health services spans over 20 years, working with health systems throughout the state that have included Hackensack Meridian, UMC Mountainside. Welcome, Assemblywoman. Thank you again so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for sharing the mic, Helen.
Always, and always happy to share the mic with you. I'm always grateful for all that you share and your service to our state and to our citizens, of course. I believe we heard from our tech guru that we're ready to go with the statement. So let's try that again. I would like to share with you IWCA of Northern New Jersey's response to the verdict yesterday and our thoughts on the matter. We know and we believe that justice and accountability definitely prevailed with the outcome of the verdict. It does not vindicate hundreds of years of systemic racism that has brought us to this point, though. But it does give us a moment of hope that there can be equitable justice for not just some, but for all in our country. Our work continues until we reach this place, but we can only get there by deepening our commitment to delivering equal treatment to all, which is our constitutional right. We at the YWCA of Northern New Jersey will continue to educate and to activate our community until our mission is realized and that we reach our end goal of eliminating racism. We know that trust needs to be built between our Black communities and our law enforcement, and quite frankly, all of our communities and our law enforcement. And we stand with our Black communities to support reform of our policing system so we have no more lives that are lost as tragically and unjustly as George Floyd's life was. But unfortunately, we know from watching the news that there have been other episodes and incidents that have occurred that are equally as concerning. And so, again, we know that there is much more to do, even in the wake of this verdict. Our prayers are with George Floyd's family. We know that they continue to grieve the loss of their loved one. We also know that our Black communities are processing a range of emotions right now, and we stand with them, we listen, and we're here to learn.
Great.
So,
That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. That was heartfelt, Helen. Nice job.
well, thank you. Our obviously our organization stands, with our Black communities, and I guess I'd like to start with, as a woman, as a Black woman, I know I shared such an impressive background and all you do in service, but as a Black woman, what did the verdict mean to you and to your family this week?
So it was, again, it was emotional for us all. And as you indicated, let's always remember that a life was lost too soon and violently, and the world watched. To the family who, expressed courage and grace, and we still see that today as we watch them on the news. The joy, the prayers, people standing shoulder to shoulder of all races, you and I together, having open communication about a very hard subject of race and over enforcement of policing on Black people and the loss of life. It's a journey for transformation in our justice system. One of the things that has touched my heart and resonated is the scales of justice tipped in our favor. Mm-hmm. As Black people, hearing 3 guilty verdicts come across, you just felt a release of faith in the facts. A jury who served and had a tough service. They had a tough service as citizens on that jury. A 17-year-old girl who felt her only power was to record with a cell phone what was happening so others could see what she couldn't believe she was seeing, and then having the courage and the strength to recount that on a witness stand in a court. That was the power that she used to elevate her voice. So you're talking about over 400 years of oppression for Black people in this country. You're talking about a modern day knee on the neck killing in front of the world. And there was many correlations to Emmett Till. And you've heard the mantra of say their names, Breonna Taylor, right? Sandra Bland, Ahmaud Arbery, Eric Gardner, time and time again. What was different this time was we had a positive verdict of guilty. We had law enforcement who also said this was not the training that they had to subdue someone who was handcuffed already on the ground and secured, to allow other officers to actually witness this and not stop or act. So in New Jersey, we passed legislation, duty to act, and that's being passed around the country, and speak out when an officer is doing something that you know is wrong. And we teach our kids that. When, as I see the YWCA banner, you all teach character development in our young people.
Yeah.
And you teach a multicultural thread of young people how to engage, play sports, use their intelligence, speak, read, all of those programs, which are social mobility programs, childcare, swimming, all of those things build character. But at some point, there's a tipping point, and I think the country was at a tipping point where this verdict actually had an impact across the country of what our court system is capable of doing. To the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, and his team, who were able to secure the facts to lead to this conviction. Proud of them as well, because they have a tough job also when they have to stand against a sworn law enforcement officer. So none of this was easy work, but it does show the bravery of the people engaged, the courage of the family to work through their grief, to stand united, to speak to the millions of people who stood shoulder to shoulder in rage, but yet in unity, in protest for over 80 days across the world to denounce the senseless killing of George Floyd. So it's a lot of emotion, let alone we talk about the trauma that has to be recurring. And for us, again, and I say us, Black women, Black people, every death is a feeling and a sentiment that connects you to someone else. He could have been my brother. He could have been my uncle. He could have been my cousin, because we feel that raw pain, especially when it's senseless and too soon. So having these discussions, I think, begins the healing process. And it also leads us to begin to think of how we all can get engaged, activate, one of my favorite verbs, of how we all can be a part of making sure we have a fair system in the courts and a quality of life to live our best lives for as long as our God keeps us here on earth.
Yes, yes. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that from a personal place too, because again, I know that, you stand for so much because of your position. But at the end of the day, when we all lay our heads on the pillow, as I always say, all we are is, how we were born, right? I mean,
Right.
so
That's
I appreciate that. I had the opportunity yesterday to watch something that I found to be very impactful, and I am going to make sure at some point we put the link here in the comments. It was a Facebook Live event that Mayor Ras Baraka of Newark pulled together of various Black leaders to talk about the verdict and to talk about, where we go from here. And there was so much in that. And obviously, you were part of that panel for anyone who didn't get to watch it. And again, I'm going to find the link and put it here in our comments. It's on the City of Newark's Facebook page for anyone who wants to see it. But I do encourage everyone to watch it. Again, it was very impactful. One of the things I was really struck with was our Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman's statement about George Floyd, that he didn't want to be a legacy, that he wanted to be alive. And, I really felt that. And, I think about this moment that we're in. There's been so much conversation that immediately goes to policy and immediately goes to And although I want to talk about that and so much, other pieces, so many other pieces that you said, I really want to start with the mental health aspect, and I want to start with the trauma, that, people are living with. And, you said it just now yourself about how, for you as a Black woman and for Black people, they see the loss of his life and what happened to him, and can make the connection to that could be somebody in their family, and how multi-layered of emotion that is, to be able to process. And I think about, as a community, how do we be there for each other right now? And for those of us who are not Black but want to be there and be supportive, what are the resources for our Black community that other than, obviously we should pick up the phone, we should call, we should check, see how our our friends and our coworkers, see how people are doing. But in addition to that, what resources are out there for our Black communities right now to be able to deal with the trauma and the layers of trauma being dealt with?
Helen, that's a loaded question. Part of the reason that Mayor Baraka pulled that Facebook Live event together with an all-star panel of Black leaders, Congressman Donald Payne, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver, Senator Ron Rice, myself, Dr. Herb Conaway, who's also an assemblyman, a prosecutor down in Atlantic County, and was for the healing pieces. Regina Thomas, who was actually on the ground, former Secretary of State of New Jersey, who was on the ground in Columbus for another recent killing with the labor movement. When we come together as a people and talk, and as a Black people, that's part of the healing, talking through the grief, the stages of grief, and the trauma, right? The reenactment of the grief, right? Of how many times we've lost someone senselessly to violence in our community. We even talked about the violence within our communities, which is important for us to have those conversations as a way for us to get to not only the root, but the healing. Spirituality, very big piece of it. Grounded in faith. During this pandemic, church houses being closed, whoever thought, that would happen, where we couldn't go to houses of worship, where we would have a word delivered that would renew our spirit, something I miss gravely, even though we have online platforms. So as we use technology in this innovative age, what we know to do, and Black people have done this, and you've probably seen it through different TV episodes, is we come together. Sharing a meal, also big part of healing. Being able to speak freely about your pains and fears without judgment. Being able to share that tear, because I've talked to countless people, and it's not just picking up the phone, but sometimes it's just allowing yourself to breathe with someone who knows why you have no words. Because Helen, sometimes there are no words to express the continuous trauma that is placed upon our shoulders that we must bear. And then renewing our spirit so we can get out and fight again, right? So we move from the trauma to the pause in the moment to the grief stages, and sometimes we move through them too quickly. And I'll say that working in mental health, I'll say that as a Black woman who's raising a Black young man who's 21, who's married to a Black male who's over 50, who still has a threat on their lives, that we need to stop. And we need to pause. And for other cultures, because this race is not won by the swift, and we can't do this alone. Any great movement had people standing shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm. We need all cultures to join in with us, because as we take care of each other, as we respect the humanity of Blackness, others come along and they're lifted. We don't just lift ourselves. We can't have more protections for a bird than we do for Black people. And that's important for us to allow that to settle. And it's important for us to have safe spaces where we can have this dialogue. It's important for it to be multicultural, multi-generational. And it's important for us to not say this is just one and done, because we know better now. And we're more connected today than ever through social media, the internet, so we can respond quickly. So we definitely need to make sure we stay uplifted and we activate and we do change some policies, some laws, some rules, move people into law enforcement or out of law enforcement when more harm is done than good, by the senseless killing.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you for sharing that. And, we do encourage everyone to, reach out and find informal and formal supports, during this time. A few weeks ago, maybe months ago now, I sometimes lose track of time during these days for sure. We had a wonderful conversation here about, support for our Black community's mental health support. And it's a system that was put together of mental health professionals specifically to support the growth of more Black mental health professionals. And I often say this about our sexual violence program. If you have a heart issue, you go to a cardiologist.
Right.
There's a lot of wonderful mental health folks out there for sure, but you definitely want to seek out someone who understands specific trauma to racism as well, because it's different. It's a different type of trauma. So, it's wonderful to know that we have mental health professionals out there that specialize, in this work if formal support is needed, and that they're groups and individuals, on top of all the wonderful faith-based, institutions that are out there. And of course, family and friends. But please seek out what you need, and, please connect with, whether it's us or other organizations as well, if you need any type of referrals, because we're, are here and understand that the mental health aspect is by far the piece that people need to focus and care for themselves right now through. So you mentioned the policies, that's been so much of the narrative, since the verdict is, where do we go from here, and what do we push to pass, and what systems do we work to change? So let's talk a little bit about, actions, from here, and what's next? What else should we be focused on? Here in the state of New Jersey. Let's start there. Then I guess we can talk nationally too, because I know that there's lots of layers to, we talked about activating, folks, get your pens and paper out. This is where the list comes from. We do have more work to do, and we've got to come up with the list and share the workload to get it done.
Absolutely. So a couple things. So as in my capacity as chair of the Legislative Black Caucus in New Jersey, in the summer, August, post the killing of Mr. Floyd, we came up with over 60 different pieces of legislation. I just want to highlight a couple of them. All politics is local. So as much as we follow the federal level, I am proud of a lot of the work that we've done that the federal government, our representatives, have picked up to take to Washington. Some of them have included a community civilian review board, where civilians from a community who has had an incident have an opportunity to review the actions of law enforcement against the civilians over use of force. We had a use of force report in New Jersey that showed an overuse on Black people in the state of New Jersey, right here in the state of New Jersey. So please be on the lookout for that bill. It's A4656, and I'll make sure you have the link. It's sponsored by Assemblywoman McKnight out of Hudson County. And again, we're working to make sure that civilians have a say in over enforcement of police in their communities at every level. Also, a reparations task force bill. One of the things that I find that we need to do, and we learned throughout the civil unrest over the summer, is people were asking to be educated. People were asking to learn more about what the country's role has been in slavery, let alone what New Jersey's role has been with slavery. We talk about a wealth gap. When you look at the wealth gap in New Jersey, an African American has $100 in savings in comparison to a white person in New Jersey with over $300,000 in savings. It's just wrong. How do we get to the middle? We've raised the minimum wage to $15 with the scale going up, but it's not enough as a livable wage in the state of New Jersey. We have redlining laws, and you've heard Senator Cory Booker tell his personal story of how his parents had to have someone else go to see the home that his family's home in Bergen County. And then when they showed up, as he tells the story, the dog gets bigger and bigger who chased his father when he got into a fight over the purchase of that home. Those are real stories. So in New Jersey, part of the wealth gap is that we couldn't buy homes, and we were relegated as Black people to certain communities. Wealth gap. So we need to look at this holistically. A reparations task force, which is Assembly Bill A711, will allow for thought leaders to come together and study and put together a position statement on New Jersey's role in slavery. In Washington, they have a reparations bill as well that talks about the impact all across the board: financial, education, economics on Black people, descendants of slaves. So again, as New Jersey goes, so does the federal government. Mental health bills, making sure we have access to mental health care. Helen, you mentioned that there are specialties out there who are race-based, ethnic-based, LGBTQ plus, you name the list. And these folks are credentialed and ready to help. But what we can't do is not fund the system or make it too complex to enter the system. Another very big deal is we have a state troopers class that is opening. Applications are out now. They have a low submission. So as officers retire, we need to be sure that we have a new class coming in that does have Black people in it, that does have Latinos, that does have Asians in these classes of training for state troopers. So we'll make sure you have that link for your home state. These are all things that your taxpayer dollars cover. I'm honored to be a public servant, but I can't do this work without people. None of us can. We need people in order to do the work. We need people to protect our quality of life. And we also need elected officials who are partnering with people to make sure that we're lifting up the policies and the change that they like to see, to make sure that everyone has an opportunity for justice that bends towards equality.
Well, thank you for giving us a good list there. And again, for our viewers, we'll be dropping in, shortly links so that you have access to all of this information. And, you mentioned, and it was discussion last night on the Facebook Live program. And again, we do have the link now to the City of Newark's Facebook Live from last evening, which again, I really do encourage everybody to watch. There was so much important information, as well as, to help with understanding and, again, to be able to support our Black communities. It's important for anyone who wants to be, an ally, and anyone who lives, who has a lived experience of that community. Everybody should be watching that. I really felt it was very important. But, the conversation last night, and you mentioned today, about making sure we have diversity in the state police. How are we pushing diversity in, again, mental health, in our medical, communities as well? I mean, obviously during COVID, we also saw, trying to get our Black communities and our communities of color in to be able to feel a comfort level and access to services, housing. We talk about all these, conversations about, and, you said it just as well now. I mean, we know mental health is so needed, but it's not always accessible to people. It's out of reach, for, insurance reasons and, costs. So the more that we can create opportunity to get our communities of color in our, different systems, what other programs and opportunities do we have to be able to, increase diversity across the board?
Absolutely. So some of the other things we've done is challenge head-on systemic and structural racism legislation to make sure that implicit bias is a training module for not only law enforcement, but also part of the civil service workers, which is also critical, because again, as you enter any of these spaces, you want to be sure that diversity and inclusion is a part of it. You also want to be sure that there's not implicit bias, that there's not microaggressions. And I know you've had those topics on your show before, because those are all internal stimuli that leads to trauma, anxiety, depression, anger, rage, all of those emotions. So we want to, it's hard to legislate behavior. You can't. We can put as many laws on the books, but you cannot legislate behavior. But each individual can work towards behavioral change. There are, steps they can take themselves for that purpose, or either seek professional coaching for that purpose, but keeping communication open. Cool heads need to prevail. We need to talk through a lot of the challenging issues in every space, pushing on corporations to do the same. And I know a number of corporations have set up diversity, equity, and inclusion officers, but we need to do more than just make an effort. Right. And that's the word we've been hearing a lot lately. We're making an effort at diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need to be the change that we're seeking to see. We need to have these conversations at the dinner table with our kids, right, and our families. And we need to call out racism. We need to call out disparaging remarks when we see them. We need to call them out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for our viewers who are looking to learn more about some of these issues, and the YWCA Northern New Jersey has a number of programs starting about raising race conscious children. It's never too young to start these conversations. There's age appropriate information to be passing each year as they get older. But it's our responsibility, to not only do it as parents, but also we are working with our schools, come this fall with bringing some Raising Race Conscious Children training in for school personnel and school employees to be able to talk about race as well. Again, the change will come the more that we create opportunities for these discussions, because these discussions, will lead. And I thought that was one of the things the Lieutenant Governor said yesterday. Again, that was, I think such a testament to this time. I mean, she talked about all the protests, and she talked about, what has transpired, since George Floyd's murder to, present day really has been, straight, nonstop, voices not letting, continuing to say his name and continuing to push for this moment of this verdict. And that, obviously the Black community was central to that, but that, other communities finally, have also been standing up and standing together. And so the more we can educate, and the more that we can inform, and the more that we can, teach people techniques, strategies, ways to share this information, and to also look at their own biases. We're very involved in the Undoing Racism training. We have our 21-day Racial Justice and Social Equity Challenge. We have a lot, for those of us that are not Black people and people of color, we have a lot to learn and unlearn to be able to get to the place of the reality, as opposed to what the social constructs have taught us.
Right.
And that's a process that we need to go through, because we can change all the policies in our organizations. We can place people in positions, diverse people in positions, but if we don't change attitudes, and if we don't change our behaviors, and if we don't create opportunities for discussions to create safe places to work on issues that arise, then none of that becomes institutional. They just become like a checkoff box, and they're not the real process. So I stand with you and share with you and share to our viewers that, this is a very active process. It's an interpersonal, journey, and it's a collective journey that we all need to stand together on. So let's talk a little bit about some of the federal pieces, which I know, was a big discussion tomorrow too. And I know that you're, very involved. I know you're involved in our, so entrenched in our New Jersey work, but just so we can highlight for our viewers, and we'll be bringing more conversations around areas and ways to support advocacy here. What are some of the national pieces of legislation and, policy reform that we should be focused on and thinking about right now?
Right. So I do think an action step is to make sure we reach out to our congresspersons and senators for your respective areas to support the George Floyd Act, because that talks about licensing for police officers and banning a chokehold on a federal level. So, because again, as much as we do in New Jersey, we need it mirrored on a federal level, so that way it's not perpetuated in other states. So we definitely need to follow the pieces. We also need to make sure that the Voting Rights Act is finally passed, so that we're never threatened with the loss of the right to vote, as we see other states, i.e. Georgia, trying to restrict the right to vote with a de minimis voter fraud argument. Right, making voter rights accessible versus contracting from many means, such as mobile voting, to drop boxes, which we did in New Jersey, to early voting, not waiting for one day just so everyone can converge upon the polls to vote. We need to open up access. We need to think as a society, because this is our moment in time, coming off of a pandemic, trying to get folks vaccinated, where we haven't seen anything close to the coronavirus since the Spanish flu. It's our moment to make sure that we have a healthy country. And health comes in many forms. Health not comes in, not only in physical health, but economic health, environmental health, making sure we have clean air, quality drinking water. All those things are also at the federal level. We haven't invested in our infrastructure. So we need to make sure we're following those pieces, and the Y has been great about following a number of those pieces of legislation. But we also need to make sure that there is an economic opportunity. New Jersey is huge for small businesses, making sure that we're allowing them to thrive and putting resources in place, and not only just white businesses, but Black, Latino, women-owned businesses, Asian-owned businesses, that they're allowed to thrive coming out of this pandemic. So creating opportunity is what we're called on to do, but it doesn't happen without people power. So really, what I want people to know, if they don't walk away with anything else, and what we learned from Mr. Floyd's untimely death, is that people still have power. And when we stand united together, we can create the change, and we are the change. Because at the end of the day, we all bleed blood, but we also need to galvanize around synonymous issues of the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness.
Yes, yes. And, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do want to make sure to ask you, I know that, and as I've shared before on this broadcast when we've had you on earlier, I am an avid follower of you on social media, and appreciate, all the, education you do for those of us about, the different important issues that you're connected to. And most recently, and I know this has been a focus for some time now in New Jersey with our current governor, because it's been an area our first lady, has really focused on, has been around infant maternal health here in New Jersey, and the disparities that exist. Can we just spend a little bit of time? I'd be remiss if we didn't spend a little bit of time talking about that. When we talk about the systems and the systemic racism, this is an area that we really, have been working hard to make some change, because New Jersey really has such an appalling rating, in this area.
Sure, and thank you for that. New Jersey ranked 47th in the country for Black maternal deaths in the country while giving birth. Last week was Maternal Health Week, where we try to highlight, and that was done on my website as well, the rates of death and bring awareness to the fact that Black women are more likely to die than a white woman while giving birth. It's an atrocity. It's something that should be a joyous occasion. As I delivered 2 babies, and we were, super excited and scared, of course, right, during the birthing process, but making sure that the mother's voice is heard and that of the family. We learned that there was systemic and structural racism inherent in the system. As far as if a Black woman said she had a headache, she was sent home, and it might have been as a result of preeclampsia, and diagnosed too late led to the tragedy of loss of life. Early deliveries that were not medically necessary, inducing labor, again, leads to the baby not having enough time in the womb and more complications. So we've learned so much through this process of simple things that we can work to improve. First Lady Tammy Murphy has been excellent as far as being a champion with us. And that's where we talk about the partnership, Helen, which we've been talking about this entire series, if you will, and being sure that we continue to raise the voices. We've heard from women who were college educated, health officers in the health system, who, when they said they experienced pain, were not heard, and had bad outcomes. So truly, we worked through a package of bills, and it's not just the legislation. We actually had to come up with a birthing plan. So have women thinking before they even give birth, what would their plan be? So things as simple as that. Create a pilot program so we can train more doulas to support a woman during her delivery across the state. We found that to be effective, and also to help them use their voice. There's a trust of the medical system that we all have, and I like to say that I have, but you know your body best. Right. And when something's not right. And when you're experiencing that, we need to make sure that we're listening to the voice of that woman, no matter the color of her skin, so that we can make sure that we're working towards the life, the health, and the safety of mom and baby.
Yes, we actually had one of our guests on Share the Mic Now shared her experience, very specifically in this area, how she was sent home and, kind of, not really listened to, and the medical issues that came to it from, for her, when she was giving birth to her children. And, this is a important issue to be focused on. And I also, would be remiss if I didn't shout out right now that our Racial Justice Awards at the YWCA hosts annually, and will be on April 29th. One of our honorees this year is Jay Wilson of Melanated Moms. And she does amazing work. We partnered with her and put on a number of programs, around this topic. But there's so many great champions that are focused on this work and in it. And we encourage everyone to learn, more about this issue and ways that you can support various initiatives, because we need to get New Jersey in better standing. The Black women in our state deserve better, and we definitely need to be focused here. So as we close out, because I know you have other things to do today other than talk with me, although I'm really obviously so grateful for the time. So you made history this year with the New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus, and so I wanted to make sure that I ended and share that, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell us, I know you mentioned it earlier, but for our viewers that may not be familiar with it, can we talk a little bit about the Legislative Black Caucus? And, congratulations on, your appointment as the head of it. I mean, how exciting. And let's talk a little bit about that as we close today.
Sure. And thank you. Thank you for the congratulations. So I am the new chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, which is in the space of Trenton. We have 20 members, both Republican and Democrats, who are either assembly members or senators. I'm the first woman chair since 1976. So it is indeed an esteemed honor to have the trust of my colleagues to serve in this capacity. The prior chairs was former Assemblyman, former Judge Joseph Charles, and Senator Ron Rice. Most recently. He's in good health for anyone who's concerned. He passed the torch. He serves in intergovernmental affairs, and he still will be raising sand, if you will, for us on issues of civil rights and social justice. A big part of our agenda as a collective of 20 members is to elevate civil rights issues, social justice, economic justice, environmental justice for all. We partner with elected officials across the state and across the country. It's important in this time, it's pivotal actually, that we stand united and lift up these concerns to make sure that we're changing policy, which is our first job. We're also compassionate in that effort and making sure that we're connecting with partners to lift up the needs of our community. So we're working with corporations around health screenings, health disparities, vaccinations, being single digits for a population, African Americans, who were disproportionately impacted with loss of life when contracting COVID-19. So we work with Black doctors, the New Jersey Medical Association, with the Garden State Bar Association, Association of Black Women Lawyers, New Jersey Institute of Social Justice, Salvation for Justice. So we are really expanding our partnership, fair housing groups, to make sure that we are standing shoulder to shoulder and continuing to battle to eradicate the systemic and structural racisms within the systems from local government to state government.
Well, I appreciate that the senator passed the torch, and I'm grateful that you have it now as well. And I'm excited to see the work that you're doing. And obviously, we, the YWCA of Northern New Jersey, stand with you to support, your initiatives and, however we can. And again, thank you so much for spending the time today. We've had so many great comments from our viewers. Just, grateful to have you obviously where you are.
Thank you.
And, we know, you're having an impact. And again, we also, appreciate you sharing, personally how you've been impacted and, for you and for your family. Again, this is definitely a time to be able to, stand in this moment and support those around us who, need it, ask what they need, listen to what they need, and work to be able to, provide that support. And we have given you, thanks to the Assemblywoman and, Judah from her team has been wonderful too, dropping links in here, and, our wonder behind the scenes, Christie has dropped some great links in here as well. So there's information about the state police recruitment, information about the city of Newark's Facebook Live again, which I can't stress enough. It's important for you to listen to, information about current and upcoming, programs that you should be involved with, and some of the legislation that we've discussed. And the YWCA will continue to be sending out, action alerts and bringing attention and conversations around these discussions as we move forward. I wanted to share, I mentioned it earlier, at 3 p.m. today, it's not too late to register. We'll put the link here. YWCA USA will be hosting a national event called Addressing Racism as a Public Health Issue.
Right.
We heard our CDC director talk about this. There's been conversation about this here locally in New Jersey. This is a public health issue, and we need to be working on racism with that framework so that we can eradicate it. So we encourage you, it's from 3 to 4:30 today. If you have the ability to be on, there is a very esteemed panel that has been pulled together to be talking about declaring and addressing racism as a public health crisis. So we do encourage you to participate in that. For any, some of the other conversations for any Black women or women of color, business owners, the YWCA of Northern New Jersey recently received a grant, and we've been sharing and promoting our initiative. There's no cost to anyone who's starting or looking to support their business. But women who identify as a Black woman or a woman of color, we have our Eureka program that you can register for. It connects you with no charge to a social media platform, as well as a full national cohort and of entrepreneurs and coaches that also lead to financial support for the small businesses that we are organizing. We have 40 slots for women to be able to have them participate in this initiative, thanks to the grant that we received. So we do encourage you. We have 22 women that are currently registered and already involved in the program, and we've gotten great feedback. But we encourage anyone else who knows someone who could benefit from it to also stay connected. And I also just want to bring attention to the fact, I mentioned our Racial Justice Awards, which is April 29th at 7 p.m. We're honoring many trailblazers in our community that are doing racial justice work. But also this evening at 7 p.m., we have YWCA of Northern New Jersey has a town hall around to support our AAPI communities, and specifically talk about how it can support our youth in school, our AAPI youth in school, and to be able to manage some of the hate and comments and bullying that they are receiving, because there's been so much wonderful support for the community because of all the horrifying experiences and episodes that they've had to deal with. But it's important to also think about our youth that are in the schools and are dealing with this. And so we have two young people sharing their experiences, and a parent and a professional talking about ways that we can support them. So that's at 7 p.m. tonight. And the wonderful thing about all these discussions, this one that we just did, the town hall this evening, and many of the others that we do here, if you don't have the time to watch them now, or if there's someone now that you're watching that you think you wish could have participated and you wish had seen it, this is very easy to share with them. YWTV was created as an opportunity to get information out there, and you're part of being able to do that. And when we talk about being an ally and also, being a supporter to a community, it's not just about listening. It's about taking this information, integrating it into a casual conversation you're having with someone. Talk about it at the dinner table with your family. Take this link, messenger it to someone, send it in a text, share this broadcast to your Facebook page, and help amplify these discussions, because that is part of it. There's a continuum of ways to get involved. Letter writing about any of these issues that we've talked about, or participating in these events and learning more, being part of protests for sure. Everyone is not wired to do everything, but everyone can do something. And that's what we need to focus on. So please, figure out where your space is, and definitely sit in it and do your part, because, this is a public health issue, what we're dealing with racism, and we need to together band to eradicate it for sure. So with that, thank you all for spending the time with us today. Assemblywoman, so grateful again. I know I've said it so many times.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for you personally, and I'm grateful for you spending the time with us, and to our viewers for sticking with us and listening today as well. So everyone, have a great day. Be well, and we'll see you.
Everyone. Thank you.